Hi, so my name is Kaylin Odell, and I'm going to be presenting my project on environmental justice. So I think when speaking on this topic, we kind of need to understand the definition of environmental justice. So to begin, it's defined as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, policies, and regulations. And I also think it's important to look at the opposite of environmental justice, so that's environmental injustice. And it's essentially just the opposite. So it's the disproportionate exposure of communities of color and the poor to pollution and its effects on health and environment, and they have unequal protection of provided by laws and policies and regulations. So an example I'm going to be speaking about today is an example of environmental injustice. Originally, I wanted to do my project on an example of a community that experienced injustice that was then resolved into environmental justice. But in my research, I couldn't really find one, so I thought I'd at least bring light onto an example of injustice. So what I'm going to be speaking about today is Warren County. It's located in North Carolina, and it's highlighted in red on this map. So the story of Warren County, it's located in Afton, and essentially in 1982, the state of North Carolina established a landfill to dispose of 6,000 tons of PCB contaminated soil, very close to a groundwater source in that county, and it was made up of 75% of African Americans. And essentially, PCB is a man-made chemical that was implemented for electrical uses, like plasticizers for paints, rubber, plastics. So essentially just a type of waste from products that we buy every day. And the health effects is that it's a carcinogen, so it's known to cause cancer. It affects the immune system, nervous system, and reproductive system. So this also becomes an environmental health issue at that time. And another issue with Afton is that there was no government representation and no city council, no mayor. It was a very small community, and there actually was 6 weeks of nonviolent protests with 500 arrests, and this included citizens, civil rights leaders, environmental advocates, and even political figures. So a lot of people were protesting this landfill that was going to be put in place. And actually, a U.S. House of Representative, Walter Fauntroy, was also arrested during this. And unfortunately, ultimately, the protests did not make a difference. However, one great thing that came out of this was the environmental justice movement. And the picture you see on this is just protesters led by the local reverend. And yep, so continuing, this is another picture of protesters. They're blocking the delivery of PCB waste. And clearly you can see it was a very peaceful protest. They're just sitting there. So what happened following this whole situation? So in 1983, a civil rights activist advocated for the U.S. General Accounting Office to review hazardous waste siting decisions. In specific region, it was EPA Region 4, so this included a lot of southern states. And the office published a report the same year that found a correlation between hazardous waste sites in low-income minority neighborhoods. So this kind of proves that there was an issue at the time that hazardous waste materials were being chosen to be placed in low-income areas. Continuing on in 1994, President Bill Clinton signed an executive order that established federal actions to address environmental justice in minority populations, as well as low-income populations. And as of 2016, the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights released a report that concluded that the EPA has failed to provide relief to minority communities affected by pollution. And that kind of ties back to my research, and the issue is I could not find an example of an environmental justice area or environmental injustice area that was treated right and it was fixed. So just goes to show things still need to happen to fix this. And this was actually something cool I found. So this is an interactive map, and hopefully it opens and loads. And essentially this map shows toxic sites all over the United States. So here I can click, and it goes by year, as you can see, a lot more hazardous waste is popping up. And you can also go by a specific type of contaminant. So I can find PCBs, ranking score you can do, or the type of population, race, but just showing you like where PCB contaminated areas are. You can see by year and the hazardous ranking score. So I just thought that was interesting to look at and to see kind of where they are located. So going back to my slides here. So I think, tying this back to political ecology, I think we're taught to look at the bigger picture and really ask questions as to why these things are happening. So some questions I came up with are, do the pros outweigh the cons in this situation? Are these the best areas for hazardous waste sites? Is that why they're going there? And also, do hazardous sites build around these communities, or do the poor migrate to them due to low housing prices? And that also ties back to an income issue. So it kind of all ties together into a bigger picture. And another thing is like land use decision making is also at the heart of these environmental issues. Somebody's deciding to put these hazardous waste sites in these areas. And another kind of contributing factor to the questions I just asked, why are they being put into low income areas? And it could be because minority communities tend to struggle with other issues, such as poor housing conditions or unemployment, and they may not be out on the streets protesting, a local hazardous landfill. Another issue could be education and the access to the information. They may not even know the hazardous effects that these sites can put onto them. And also lower economic status in these areas might or may be used to provide jobs. So this is kind of like, do pros outweigh the cons? Are they getting jobs from these hazardous waste sites? So that could be another issue to think about. And also, these issues need to be addressed for environmental justice to take place. And if they're just being ignored, then nothing's going to be solved. So this is just a little snippet I took. It's a national report on racial and socioeconomic characteristics of communities with hazardous waste sites. And they actually found in this study that the association between race and the location of these facilities were stronger than any other association tested, and the probability that this association occurred purely by chance is less than 1 in 10,000. So it just again proves that there actually is an issue with government choosing to put these hazardous waste sites in these low-income areas. And that's my work cited. So thank you for listening.